At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance.
When history is created in every single movement, there are people who stand out tall. There are two things where the reason why is one because of the good work or maybe milestone that they've achieved, and the other one maybe the mistakes they've made and maybe the generation that has followed is suffering. Now, the gentleman that I'm talking about today is a person who was born on 14 November 1889 and died on 27th May 1964. He went on to become the first Prime Minister of India and played, let us say, a role in liberating Goa. The gentleman that I'm talking about is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, this is the name that has been relevant even today, both at the central as well as state politics. The reason why I want to talk about is because today is the death anniversary of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And more importantly, I wanted to know the life that Panditji lived, his political timeline, and more importantly, his Goa connection here for liberating Goa. Ladies and gentlemen, for this to speak more about, I have with me Professor Himanshu Roy, attached to Delhi University, Atal Bihari Vajpayee Senior Fellow, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, Murti House, New Delhi. Now, Professor Saab doesn't require any introduction because he's been part of our shows speaking on Atal Bihari Vajpayee earlier and also Lal Bahadur Shastri. Professor Saab, welcome to the show. Now, let me just go straight to the question. Now, as I said, this is one name that has been still relevant across history, and obviously it is relevant today also. Before we start the ball rolling, I want to ask you is why Jawaharlal Nehru was always addressed as Pandit or Panditji?
Actually, Pandit in North India, or in fact in many parts of even Western India, are addressed as Panditji, and it's a popular slang. Secondly, it was mostly his younger lords in the politics, his colleagues in the Indian National Congress and across the parties. They addressed him as Panditji. Definitely not Gandhi, definitely not Patel. They were very seniors, 15 years, 20 years. Gandhi in particular was father figure. So they used to address him as Jawaharlal. Jawaharlal. And he was, of course, by caste a Kashmiri Pandit, whose family had migrated roughly 200 years ago to Delhi from some parts of Kashmir. So caste-wise, definitely they were Kashmiri Pandits, but it was more a popular slang, lovingly, a common way of address in North India. Therefore, this Panditji, that was a popular way of addressing him, particularly those who were younger to him. It was a mark of address equally.
Okay. You said that, his family shifted long back, 200 years back from Kashmir to Delhi. And, obviously, we know a lot about Panditji. And also, I would like to know if you can summarize his life, especially the early days, maybe before independence. How do you summarize Panditji's life?
See, he was not a brilliant student in his school, college days, and of course had a life in plenty. His father, Motilal Nehru was in politics, Indian National Congress, had a good amount of money, gave his building for the Congress party headquarters was located virtually in Allahabad. We all know these things. Part of the school curriculum that we have been taught from the being kids. But let me focus on his political contribution. He was in the jail for 9 years. Definitely, we all know. The family fought for independence. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it, including his mother and his wife, his daughter, his father. So entire family almost was involved into the freedom struggle. So if it has to be summarized in one way, that the whole family fought for independence. And if I put it in this way, that Nehru or Jawaharlal was never interested in that way of choosing a career, like say ICS or wakalat, what we call lawyers. As a lawyer, he was not a successful lawyer as Patel was. But definitely he had a very high amount of energy which is required in the politics. And secondly, his analysis of Indian history, his analysis of that academic output, the academic input or output that we find in the discovery of India, that kind of analysis was brilliant. It was more academic, suited to the academic analysis that we in the university pass on to the students. And still many times his book, Discovery of India, is a reference book mentioned in the syllabus as well. These were his good contributions. And then, of course, his drafting of letters or his tryst with destiny, the address that he did on the 14th, 15th night on the eve of independence. Those were well acknowledged and brilliant works. There's no doubt about it.
Obviously, there's a lot that we can speak with respect to Panditji. I just want to ask you one simple thing is, what was the reason that Gandhiji acknowledged him as a political hire for further journey of India, and more importantly, he was eventually was endorsed as a prime ministerial candidate also. How this shift happened, and what was the reason basically?
See, as far as it was Gandhi who made him the prime minister, let me tell you very categorically here to the for the public through your medium. It was Gandhi who made him the prime minister, and before he became actually the prime minister, 3-4 years before that, the process had begun where he began to focus on Nehru as the future prime minister. To perpetuate him, to propagate his name, to be accepted even among the senior leaders.
True.
Because one of the most powerful and most eligible to become the prime minister was Patel. I have worked extensively on Patel. The book is there. My book is there on Patel, and it has been published by Sage as well. But if you read other books, Rajmohan Gandhi, who has written on Patel.
So the strong contender was Vallabhbhai Patel ji.
Yes, very strong. In fact, he was chosen by the Congress party. He was not only the contender. He was chosen by the Congress party to be the president of the Congress, who was to become the prime minister of India. But it was Gandhi who asked him, Patel, to keep mum, sit down, and let Jawaharlal become the prime minister. Because no unit of Congress voted for Jawaharlal Nehru to be the leader of or the president of the Congress.
Okay.
In those years, it were the provincial Congress committee who used to choose the president of the Indian National Congress. That was the democratic traditions. For the first time in 1946, this was ruled out. And this was done by none else than Gandhi. And the reason, of course, that Gandhi thought are multiple. He never clarified, he never gave any reasons or explanations, but different peoples have given different interpretations. One, of course, was Nehru was very popular among the youths. He was much younger, roughly 15 years, 13, 14 years younger than Patel. And independent India needed a young leader. Young means he was 57, 56 at the time of when he took over.
Yeah.
So Gandhi might have thought that a new nation needs a leader who has been trained in the freedom struggle for 30 years, 35 years, starting from 1916. So 30 years. So even for the next 20 years, if he is alive, India will have a stable government, progress, democracy, and all kinds of stability which are required for the development of a country that Nehru can provide. Patel was around 73, 74. And so another 3, 4 years, 5 years at most. That is the, if you look into account the span of life. So keeping in on all these calculations, Lohia said one remarkable thing. Rohit, let me tell you here, normally this argument or point is not raised.
Okay.
Lohia said that since Jawaharlal Nehru is a Brahmin, so among the elite, among the Brahmins, and all over India, since Brahman is a common caste all over India, so he will be acceptable all over India among the elite and among the Brahmins. This was the reason given by Lohia.
Okay.
Interpretation that I'm sharing with you.
So it is the youth, and obviously it is a political class also that you wanted to approach and have a long-term leadership in place. Now obviously there might have had some permutation, combination, repercussions which we'll talk about later. But as you also mentioned, sir, the tryst with destiny and at the stroke of midnight. These are the words that I think every people in India have grown up hearing, and obviously you have a lot of respect when you hear those words. In terms of his speech, you also mentioned that that was speech that was quite commendable and well received across the globe. How would you look at that particular speech, and how has it helped that speech shape up the image of India and also our journey across in democratic world?
See, in over next 1 hour that he addressed the nation on the eve of independence through All India Radio in those years, that was the medium. He set a tone, tenor, objective for the country. What will be the ideals that we have? He is saying not a radical rupture, but an incremental change. A gradual, peaceful, democratic, secular India. That's the way he is looking at the future, and simultaneously setting the goal as well. Goal, the way some of the agenda of development that will be pursued by the government of independent India. And broadly those goals of democracy, of people's participation in the democratic process, their participation in the development, those are still very much relevant. You cannot say that these are outdated objectives. Very much relevant still.
Very true.
And his special assistant, John Mathai, who was subsequently removed from the Prime Minister's
office
staff, probably in 57, 59, if I remember the year correctly, once has written in his memoirs that Nehru at his time, I'm talking about this in context of the tryst of destiny with destiny, that he was one of the top 5 best draftsmen of his time in the world. And that's visible in his letters, in his broadcasts, in his public lectures. in his discovery of India, the way he presents. And Mathai says that he used to dictate after 10:30, and it used to go up to 1:32.
Midnight.
Midnight. High degree of energy. He used to work for 15, 16, 17 hours a day out of 24 hours. And he never used to revise his draft, never used to re-look at his draft.
So it was that perfect.
I'm citing Mathai from his memoirs. It's in 2 volumes. So that was something very remarkable about Nehru. High degree of precision in terms of that presentations, focus on the ideas, the draftsmanship, and the level of energy. What was remarkably where he failed was to an extent on his neighborhood. The policies that he pursued, the assessment of the realities in which Patel was far ahead of him, far better. That we can discuss later on if you have time enough.
Very true, sir. You said obviously during the independence time frame, obviously the idea was to have a democratic secular India, as you mentioned. Now, obviously, it was a challenge to have a transition from a colony to a republic India. How difficult was it, and how do you summarize it?
See, the most difficult part was two. One, the refugees who were coming, the partition. The country was now, say, 25% or 30% of its territories and the related economies and the population. It was all gone or it was in flux. Then the economy from a colony to an independent nation, so strengthening the economy. The third, the princely estates, still there were 3, and those were the bigger estates. If you remember, Hyderabad, almost the most biggest one. Then this Junagadh area,
Gujarat,
and Jammu and Kashmir. They were still to be integrated with India. And all the 3 had become nuisance, where the military ultimately was sent. In all the 3 cases, Pakistan was involved. So integrity of the country was the most other important or challenging. So economy, integrity, administrative reforms. 565 princely estates.
True.
With all kinds of different rules and regulations, lack of democratic institutions, lack of political parties and freedom. So these were to be universalized. Elections were to be held. So this administrative reforms was another very important agenda. Fortunately, we had Patel to tackle all this.
Tackle all that thing.
Yes.
So, if I can ask you another thing is in regards to Nehru ji, how do you see the milestones or the work that has shaped up India over a course of time? Maybe some of his major thing. You said he was a good somebody who could draft his speeches or maybe and I believe policies as well. So if you can just maybe sum up some of his policies, that are relevant even today.
See, in those years, land reforms, of course, was very important. Now it's no longer important, but still very important. One, of course, was that if you remember, if you look at in 46, 47, many of the states which became independent or countries which became independent from the colonies, they were no longer democracy. India was almost one of the rare countries which got freedom from being a colony and remained a democracy. After every 5 years, of course, Nehru remained as prime minister for 17, 18 years, but he was chosen by the electorate.
The people, yeah.
Within a short span of less than 3 years, we had the constitution. And it's there. Of course, there has been a lot of amendments, but still it is there.
The foundation was laid at
The
a
very
quite early
strong
stage.
foundation. And still in the judgments of the Supreme Court, the debates of the Constituent Assembly is referred.
Yeah, referred.
So these were some of the very important milestones in terms of, and of course, later on, many of these problems cropped up because of the political reasons. Let me tell you that in the original constitutions, every new chapter, like fundamental rights, directive principles, have religious motives from our history. Ram, Buddha, all this part of the Indic civilizational traditions are there. We do not know these kinds of culture and the traditions that we have.
True.
We unnecessarily discuss on secularism, etc. Secularism itself was never mentioned in the Constitution
of India. It was later amended.
It was never mentioned. Because this country has always remained secular in that way. By and large, if you look at such a long trajectory of history in India, in terms of the civilizations, because there has always been continuity. And let me tell you, Rohit, let me add here one more thing, that before the British came, even there was much fluidity in the so-called caste system. India was approximately 25% of the GDP of the global economy. It was the trading hub of the world. And let me tell you, academically here, Hegel, in his classrooms in 1820s in Germany, is saying that India is known for land of wealth and land of wisdom.
So what
we imagine the entire Europe and the world coming to India for being, it was the land of desire, wealth, and the land of wisdom.
So no wonder it is always been called Sone ki Chidiya. I think India has always been the state, the country that everybody has looked, especially the West. You also mentioned that Nehruji went on to become the prime minister for around 17 to 18 years. I understand you're looking at today's political tussles, or maybe what do you call it, the pulling of the chair and people, which we see right from a municipal poll, local polls, to the central elections that we have across. Was there never a tussle between all these heavyweights? Because you had people like Baba Saheb Ambedkar, you had people like Vallabhbhai Patel. You also mentioned it was the strongest contender, Morarji Desai, and etc. etc. All these people were really heavyweights. Managing the cabinet maybe, or the leadership, or maybe Nehruji was the undisputed leader.
No, he was not the undisputed leader. No, everyone knew that it was Gandhi who made him the prime minister.
Yeah, but then again, he went on to become the prime minister for around 18 years. So how do you see that? That was the first, maybe the stamp that Gandhiji gave him. But thereafter, running the elections, or maybe fighting the elections.
Absolutely right. I agree, and therefore I wanted to emphasize this point. What you were saying, that from 51-52, he became undisputed leader. But by that time, most of these contenders, like Ambedkar, or Ambedkar in the sense that he was never comfortable with Nehru, or Nehru was never comfortable with Ambedkar. It was Patel who had brought him into the cabinet and into the Constituent Assembly. I have read 3 letters that Patel wrote to Gandhi, persuading Gandhi to agree to the proposal of bringing Ambedkar into the Constituent Assembly, and then subsequently into the cabinet. Because Ambedkar was always critical of. Congress and Gandhi and all these things.
Obviously.
But Patel could, as a hard-headed realist, could assess that this man is required for the country at this point of time. Patel himself, they might have agreed, and they agreed on 70%, 75% of the general kinds of issues that India faced at that point of time. But the manner of integration, you'll be surprised to know, Rohit, that Patel wanted integration of India in 1948 after he was recuperating on the ship, merchant ship, this naval ship after heart attack in January, February. So he had joined Bombay, that naval ship. While the ship was going towards Goa, South India, gradually. So he asked the captain of the ship, how far is Goa from this place on the ship? So the captain said, sir, something like 80, 90, 100 kilometers, something like that. That exact that distance I'm not able to remember at this point of time. Said, how many forces you have at the command here? He said some number he said, let's go to Goa and capture it. It hardly take 2 hours to 3 hours.
This was in 1948?
8. I'll give you the details if you require. And if you can read my book or even Raj Mohan's Gandhi book, where all these graphic details of the numbers and the conversations are going on. Even Vidya Shankar 2 volumes memoirs. Vidya Shankar was a PS to Patel. And he was on the ship. He was listening this conversation. So if you look at the memoirs of Vidya Shankar, the 2 volumes, you find these graphic details. So the captain of the ship said that, sir, I need a written cabinet order. And then Patel said, Nehru won't permit, forget about it. Let's go towards Kanyakumari. The ship further sailed to Kanyakumari. So Goa would have been liberated
in 48 or 50 maybe, yeah, true.
48.
48, yeah. You just mentioned Goa, and obviously I opened it saying, there is a lot of controversy. I don't want to go into the controversial part of it. Maybe let's listen to the facts based on the written documents that are there. So obviously Nehruji played a role. Important, non-important, let us not get into that. Obviously, he had to pursue a lot of international fraternity to get on board before, Goa was liberated. And then also he was criticized on sending army, which the people, were not in accordance to. How do you see this particular phase of Nehru and Goa connection?
Nehru wanted a peaceful transition. He was never interested in sending the force, even in Jammu and Kashmir, even in Hyderabad, or even in Junagadh. It was Patel who sent the military, Indian military, to liberate Hyderabad or Jammu and Kashmir, the part that we had, and then Junagadh area. Otherwise, probably we might have lost. In case of Goa as well, Nehru was not interested in sending the forces. So he was trying to negotiate through peaceful means from the Salazar or the Portuguese leader, whoever they may be at that point of time. Can you imagine, once upon a time, Portugal had made this Goa as its province. It was no longer a colony. It was made a province, a part of Portugal. And then when the new liberated colonies began to demand in the United Nations, and the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution for all these kinds of democratic process, the begin democratic process. In that way, Nehru thought that now there is no other way except to force the Portuguese government. And then if I remember correctly, on the 17th midnight, December 1961, the forces moved in. And it took hardly 2-3 hours. in 3 hours time, what Patel had visualized in 1948,
48.
that actually happened in 1961.
Which eventually happened.
It eventually happened. So that could have been. In that way, everyone knew that Patel was a very hard-headed realist. And before taking the actions, he used to calculate everything in details very meticulously. He never did any hasty steps, took any hasty steps or did anything hastily. But Nehru in that way was not so hard-headed realist.
So he wanted a peaceful arrangement first,
Transition
and
of
also,
merger of Goa,
and
yes.
also maybe take the entire world community along, so that there was no backlash rather across the globe. That would be one
You can argue in that way, but we have seen as a teacher of political science, it has been part of our curriculum that if you have the power, if you have the economic power, if you have the military power, it's you who will decide the way Chinese government is functioning today, the way the American government has been functioning in the past 50, 70 years, the way the British government functioned in the past.
Correct.
So it's the military power and it's the economic power that decides the dominance of any country. And then the global power, the different countries come with you.
Okay, if I can again ask you something related to Goa, is I've grown up hearing this phrase that once Panditji used this line that "Ajeeb hai Goa ke log." Now, I don't want to go to any other person and ask this. I want to ask you directly. Did he ever use this statement, one, and also in what context?
See, what happened that in 1960, probably when the first election was held, 62, 63, when the first election was held, when the entire India was voting for Congress, Goa voted for
a regional party,
local regional party, Gomantak Party.
Yeah, Maharashtrawadi Gomantak Party, MGP.
MGP, Maharashtrawadi Gomantak Party, and that surprised him. He thought and he expected that since Congress had been fighting for liberation in 46, 48, 55, etc., 54, and Lohia has been going there and there have been a lot of killings, etc. And then I, as a Prime Minister representing Congress, sent the forces, the military, to liberate Goa. Goa has been liberated. So he expected that the Congress will be voted into power. But instead of that, it was a local, regional Maharashtrawadi Gomantak Party that was voted into the power. That was a surprise to him. And maybe at the spurt of the moment, that might have been
this statement that we have heard.
So it was a political statement. It was not a slur on the local
people,
Goan people. Absolutely no.
It is the political choice or political thought process that was in question. Sir, thank you very much for joining and sharing all this information based on his life, one, and also his Goa connection. In regards to Professor Himanshu, I just want to say one thing, that he is really the encyclopedia for us. And anytime we want to go back to history and refer some of the pages, I think he's just a phone call away, and has always been part of Prudent, sharing his thoughts and views and opinion. Thank you very much for joining, sir.
Thank you, Rohit.
Well, in context to Panditji, I would just like to say Nehru, as the name is relevant today, whether it is central politics or the state politics, whether you like him or you hate him, he is still relevant till date. I think on that note, I want to end this program. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much, Himanshu ji, for sharing your valuable time with us. And you keep watching Prudent.